Hey guys, Dark Skeleton here, and today we're going to take a look at the remainder of the Goblins vs. Gnomes cards. The other day they dumped 61 cards on the community. I reviewed a few of the cards in individual videos. Now I'm going to do the rest of the cards in group stages because 61 single card videos would be ridiculous. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting from the top. This can all be found on hearthstone.com if you're curious or you want to see it yourself. So first off, we have the Tree of Life, which is actually a very interesting card. It restores all characters to full health. Well, obviously, that means your opponent too. It means all your characters on your board, and it also means you. So basically, it's reset the game and play with your remaining cards. I think that this card would be great in any kind of stall deck. A deck which just wants you to basically sit until the late game and keep surviving. Then when you're in the late game, the remainder of your cards are huge, so no matter what your opponent does, they basically can't win. And if you're able to basically play Tree of Life against a aggro deck that's already burned all their cards, you basically have the game sealed. And then if we take a look at the next card, Malorn, I looked at this card previously, but he is a minion that shuffles back into your deck, and it's also a big minion. This would work very well with Tree of Life, I believe, because you can keep drawing him over and over again as long as Malorn doesn't get silenced. And it's also a pretty big, beefy minion, so drawing Malorn over and over again would not be a bad thing. It's going to cause your opponent a lot of trouble unless they can remove it with something like a Hex or a Silence plus destroying it normally. But it could be very good in stall decks, and I also think it would be pretty good in Arena. Next, Recycle. Shuffle an enemy minion into your opponent's deck. I don't know about this one. It costs 6 mana in order to do it. I've noticed that a lot of the Druid hard removal, or the closest thing you can get to hard removal, is very expensive for what it does. Poison Seeds is pretty bad in most situations, and it doesn't even remove everything for 4 mana. And Recycle, yeah, you get rid of a minion, and you don't trigger its Death Rattle effect, and you might never see that minion again, but it costs 6 bloody mana to play. If it was 5 mana like a Assassinate, I think it would be more reasonable, but I kind of question if this is really all that worth it. If there was a card that your opponent would never in a million years want to shuffle back into their deck, maybe something like a Pit Lord, where when it gets battlecried, they get a major poor effect. Or if you've looked at the Iron Juggernaut, the new Warrior Legendary, when a mine is drawn, and the Iron Juggernaut puts a mine into your opponent's deck, when that mine is drawn, they take 10 damage. If there was a card like that that you could stuff into your opponent's deck, and then force them to play it again, that would be pretty cool, but I don't really see too many uses for this yet. It's just too expensive. I think it'll be even iffy in Arena. Maybe slightly less bad in Arena because you can afford to stall into the later game. It's very slow. It basically goes till everybody runs out of cards. I don't like it. Next up we have Dark Whispers. Now, this card gives you 2 options for 6 mana. One is to summon 5 Wisps. Hilarious, but also that would be pretty crazy for any kind of token deck. 5 creatures, it doesn't matter that they're 1/1s. If you buff it up with Power of the Wild or you use a Savage Roar on that, that's a lot of potential right there. It's very vulnerable to AoE, of course. I mean, a bunch of 1/1s. Or you can choose to give a minion +5/+5 and taunt, which is pretty decent too. I mean, that means you basically take any minion you want and you make it pretty dang bulky. At least something like a 6/6 with taunt. The mana cost is a little bit high. I think that's the kind of card you're going to generally want to run in token decks. Maybe a Violet Teacher token deck. Then not only do you get the buff, but you also get a token no matter which effect you choose. And in Arena, I think it would be a reasonable pick as well. Maybe not top tier, but pretty good. And lastly, for the Druids, of course this isn't all of the cards that Druids are getting this expansion, just for the last 61 cards. Grove Tender, who is a 2/4 for 3 mana, which is average stats-ish, and it has the effect, like many other Druid cards, you get to pick from two, I mean. And one is to give each player a mana crystal, which is okay if you want to ramp up to that 10 mana, and giving your opponent the mana crystal isn't going to hurt you that much, then okay, you can do that. Or each player can draw a card. The card would be crazy if it didn't also do the same thing for your opponent. I think it's more of a niche card, because in a lot of situations you really don't want your opponent to draw a card or gain a mana crystal. At least you have the option of choosing which one you want. And in Arena mode, I think it'll be average-ish. I think it's kind of okay in Constructed. It would take a special deck to make it really good, I think. Uh, it might be ran in some people's decks. Not too impressed by it. So, next up, the Hunter, the King of Beasts, which I would say doesn't come close to competing with Savannah Highmane, but it's a 2/6 taunt that has the battle cry of gaining +1 attack for each other beast you have, on the field, obviously. I like that it's a battle cry and not a static effect where it will, if you destroy the rest of your beasts on the field, then King of Beasts also gets weaker. So no, once you bring him out, he's good to go. Now, if you already have a strong field, and then you play this guy as like a 4/6, sorry, or a 5/6, then that would be pretty solid. He might actually be a good card in beast decks, actually, now that I think about it a little bit more. It'll be basically the first taunts that hunters have. The fact that a hunter is, well, I mean, aside from Houndmaster, the fact that they're giving a taunt to Beast Hunter might make, what's it called, Black Knight a little bit better than normal, because Black Knighting a guy like that would be pretty solid. It's a good card for Beast decks, trash and everything else, of course. And in Arena, unless you are lucky enough to draft a bunch of Beasts, obviously it's not going to be that great. If half your deck is Beasts, then, oh, yeah, go for it. And next up, the Cobra Shot. I talked about this card the other day, and I still believe it is absolute trash. You deal 3 damage to a minion and 3 to the enemy hero for 5 mana cost. The one upside is that it does scale with spell damage well, because that +1 damage is going to affect not only the minion, but also the enemy hero. The problem with this card is, in my mind, I would take a spell like this in a Hunter deck for removal. And it does remove stuff, but dealing 3 damage for 5 mana to a minion is absurd. And the extra 3 damage that it does to the enemy hero in many cases isn't all that useful. I mean, it's 6 damage in total. Damage to the enemy hero is almost never as good as killing a minion. And for Fireball, you pay 4 mana and you get the same 6 damage. So it just doesn't have the right amount of stats for what you're paying. If it was a 4 mana spell, I could see it working with any kind of spell damage. That would be cool. Like, you get +1 spell damage and then it does 8 damage for 4 mana. That would be reasonable. I kind of wonder if Blizzard will buff this card at some point. I believe in WoW, Cobra Shot scaled with damage if you used a spell called Serpent Sting, which poisoned an enemy target. Maybe they'll make it something like, oh, if Serpent Sting is played with Cobra Shot, then Cobra Shot does more damage or something like that. For the record, Serpent Sting, not in the game yet. But yeah, they could add something like that one day, but from what I'm looking at here, pretty crummy. Next up, the Metal Tooth Leaper. Now, this card is one of the cards that I think will actually make mech hunters pretty good, because as a battle cry, it gives all your other mechs +2 attack, and in any kind of aggressive attack, that's very, very ridiculous. And having 3/3 stats for 3 mana in addition to that, wow, what a crazy card. That's like as good or better than a Dark Iron Dwarf, better if you're playing a pure mech deck, and that's what you're going to do in Constructed. So even in Arena, though, it might be pretty good to play. I mean, it really depends on how many mechs you have in the deck, obviously, but they are adding a ton of mechs. So being able to draft a Metal Tooth Leaper, I could see it. It depends on what you have available, but even if you don't have anything else, it's still 3/3, which is average. But yeah, in Constructed Hunter mech decks, this card will always be run, I believe. And lastly, for Hunters, we have the Glaive Suka, which is an absolutely ridiculous name for a weapon. But what it does, 2 attack, 2 durability for 2 mana, which is pretty meh on the stats. But as a battle cry, it also allows you to give a random friendly minion +1 attack. Now, if you take that into account, it's comparable to something like a Stormforged Axe. I think it might even be a little bit on the weaker side. I'd almost prefer to have a 3rd swing over that +1 battle cry. Though, in fairness, the Stormforged Axe does give you the drawback of 1 overload. It's an okay card. I don't think it's as good as Eaglehorn Bow. Not by a long shot if you're playing a Trap Hunter. It could be seen in some Hunter decks. I think if you're not going to run any other weapons, then at least you have Glaive Suka. I don't think it'll be in every Hunter deck. It's more niche. In Arena, it's pretty good because you can kill 2 minions pretty easily. It's not as vulnerable to Ooze, because the Ooze is usually only going to get 1 durability at most. And buffing a friendly minion is pretty decent. So, good in Arena, iffy in Constructed, depends on what kind of deck you're running. Now, back to the Mage. Now, the Mage is a class that's actually getting pretty cool. I covered the Flame Leviathan the other day. The cool thing about it is that when you draw into it, it deals 2 damage to all characters, which is a very unique effect. Because it's random, I think it would only be good in decks that can really stand to have their board be cleared, or that actually want their board to take damage, like a Acolyte of Pain Freeze Mage or something like that. I think it might be slightly weaker than Baron Geddon and anything but a pure mech deck. Baron Geddon, you're able to control the 2 damage AoE. This card you're not, and you're only getting 2 extra stats for it, which is health, which is fine. In a mech deck, I think I could see it being run. It's a decent legendary, kind of niche. In Arena, I think it's draftable in Arena. I don't know if it's great. I mean, that RNG is risky, because typically in Arena you play a lot of minions, but you could just try to draft like a Flame Strike deck and minimize the amount of minions you draft, but usually you don't end up with more than 10 spells regardless of what you do, so it's a okay legendary in Arena. And next up we have a creature that's actually pretty cool in my opinion, the Wee Spell Stopper. It's a 4-mana minion, 2/5 stats, which is just as crappy as Ancient Mage, but it gives you the ability, instead of giving the adjacent minion spell damage as a battle guy, it allows you to make, well, as long as it's on the field, the adjacent minions cannot be targeted by spells or hero powers. Now, that's a very cool effect. You would have to have something in your deck that's really necessary to protect. I don't know, if you were doing something like a Mimiron's Head mech deck, and you wanted to protect the Mimiron's Head from spells, maybe. I don't think it really belongs in a mech deck. But I'm sure someone will find a use for it eventually. That can be a very annoying effect when you can't remove something with your spells, and could really screw people over, and no one wants to have to use their removal on a 2/5. So, it could see some use. I think it's much better in Constructed than Arena, obviously, because in Arena you don't have as many spells that are going to be directly trying to remove things. Yeah, that's about all to say about it. Crappy stats, if you play it at all, you play it for the effect, which can be good in certain circumstances. Next up, the Echo of Medivh. Now, this card performs similar to what I thought it would do when I saw it in the GvG card vote preview. And what it does is it puts a copy of each friendly minion into your hand. I thought it would basically clone a minion that was already on the field. Now, putting minions into your hand, Duplicate already does that, but it does it as a secret. And for 4 mana, I'm not really sure this card's entirely justified. If you were trying to play like a Mill Mage or something like that, and you just wanted to, ooh, I have 3 dudes on the board that I want to keep, so I'll make clones of them. It's a very slow card to play, and I don't think there's that many decks where you could really use it that effectively to justify the card slot. Probably no more than 1, if any at all. Maybe, no, I can think of one deck that might run it, and that would be a Molten Giant or a Giant's Mage. Because you could, at certain points during the game, you can play those Molten Giants for free, and if you had 2 Molten Giants, cloned them, and then played the 2 Molten Giants for free, putting 4 Molten Giants on the board, that would be pretty crazy. Though that would leave you vulnerable to things like Equality Consecrate, but yeah, with Molten Giants I could see it. Not with too much else, though. It's too slow with Ysera or other cards like that, but it could be played. It could be played effectively. I think it's not worth the mana cost most situations. So, moving on, the Soot Spewer. I actually like this card a lot. It's a 3/3 with spell damage, and what's special about that is that usually spell damage cards are very weak, but this guy's actually got average stats, and on top of that, he's a mech. Now, a spell damage in a mage deck is actually pretty good, because mages have a lot of spells that do damage, and the Soot Spewer can buff those up. I'd say it's a card that's probably worth playing in many decks, and especially if you're running a mech mage deck, obviously, in combination with that Goblin Blast Mage that benefits from you having mechs in your deck. I could see a mech mage deck coming into fruition. Actually, I could see a lot of mech decks coming out. I think Blizzard's intent was to make every class viable with mechs in some way by, giving them their special mech cards. And I do like this guy a lot. if I make a mage deck in the expansion, and it has anything to do with mechs, or benefits a lot from spell damage, I'll probably be running 2 of these. It's a cool card.